Let's get started by talking a little bit about the analogy of the body that we so frequently use when discussing the church. We often use that word body when referring to the church. In that word, we emphasize the individual pieces that join together to perform the work of Christ on the earth. We talk about the body doing this or the body doing that. The work of Christ, however, is often carried out by smaller units of that body, groups that work together to accomplish tasks. Consider the unit of the arm. Here we have a man's body with all the different components of that body, but let's just look at the component or the unit of the arm. That has the upper arm, we have the forearm, we have the hand, we have the fingers, but it also has a shoulder, it has an elbow, a wrist, and it has joints within those individual fingers. If I want to do more than just tap my fingers on a desk, for example, just tapping them, I want to do more than that. It does me no good to have just fingers alone. I need that entire piece to work and to do something. If I'm going to grab this bottle of water and give myself a drink, I need the entire unit of my arm to accomplish that task. I can only do that if I use the combined elements of this unit or system within my body. Similarly, most of church work, even events that take the efforts of nearly all of us, like full outreach ministries, like serving the poor or VBS or something like that, even those are accomplished by the combined work of many independent teams. You've got the nursery team, you've got the kitchen team, the sound team, the sign-up table, the greeters, the teachers, and so on. You've got all these individual teams that are working together to get that work done. It's not just individual people, it's actually teams. So what we want to do in this series is we want to consider this concept of teams. And in particular, we want to look at those who lead teams. Because teams are only going to be as effective as their leadership. Just like churches are only as effective as their leaders, teams are only as effective as those who lead them. So what we're going to do over the next 4 sessions is discuss in a very practical way how to lead a team in the church. And that series will be made up of the following 4 things. We're going to have 4 different sessions. The first one tonight. First of all, and this will be this evening, we're going to look at getting things done through other people. Getting things done through other people. And then we want to look at developing people through teams in our next session. We're not just trying to get things done through teams, we're also trying to develop people through teams, including ourselves as the leaders of those teams. And then thirdly, we want to look at cultivating character that motivates others. We want to look at the individual leader and talk about the types of quality, character, and skills and practices that leader needs to have to demonstrate and be an example to others in the team so that he or she can lead that team. And then finally, we're going to add a bonus session in here where we talk about the traits of a good team member. We're going to talk about the first 3 about team leaders. And then for the final, we want to talk about how to be a good team member. That's very important as well. We can't lead teams if we don't have good team members. So let's get started then with getting things done through other people, our first session this evening. So the question that I have for you is, what is leadership? What is leadership? We're talking about team leadership, effective leading of a team. So what then really is leadership? There are a number of ways that you can define it. Some people call it just going before. You lead by going before. And that is certainly a good definition of leadership. You go out and say, hey, I'm going this way, come with me. But in a broader sense, leadership is really about getting things done through other people. That's really what leadership is all about. It's the art and the science of trying to get things done, not just by yourself, but with the help of other people in a coordinated effort. And the better you are at doing that, the better a leader that you are. If you're a leader and you don't get anything done through other people, then you really aren't a leader, because you have to get things done if you're going to be in leadership. So it's important as a foundational sort of idea and principle that we come to terms if we're going to lead a team, that we have to understand that we cannot get as much done by ourselves as we can through other people. And this is a very important line that you have to cross before you can become a good team leader. Some people become leaders of teams, but they are so used to trying to do everything on their own that they are really not good leaders because they just come in and do everything. They're not patient with their people. They don't let their people make mistakes. They don't let them work, have responsibility, and so on. So they don't make good leaders. So you have to recognize early on and come to this conviction that you cannot get as much done by yourself as you can through other people. And the way God will let you learn that is He will let you beat your head up against the wall and work yourself to death until you realize that He hasn't designed it for you to do everything. You have to get things done through other people. Let's look at a great Bible leader, a man who led a team very effectively in the Bible, the man Nehemiah. Let's look and see what he did and how he used other people. He didn't just try and do it all on his own. You remember that after the destruction of Jerusalem, some years later, Nehemiah sought out what was going on and what was wrong in Jerusalem, how Jerusalem was doing, and then he heard about how bad things were, and so he went back and he led a group of people to rebuild the wall around Jerusalem. Well, let's look at what he did here. Let's just look at some of the language that he uses as the Bible describes what he did. This is from Nehemiah chapter 2. And when he first gets there, he says this, "And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work." Just notice that phrase there, the others who did the work. "Then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come and let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. And I told them of the hand of my God which had been good upon me, and also of the king's words that he had spoken to me." As you recall, the king had given him permission to go and given him free passage and protection and even materials to rebuild the wall. So they said, "Let us rise up and build." Then they set their hands to this good work. So if you look at these phrases that I've highlighted in yellow, what you realize is that from the very beginning when Nehemiah gets to Jerusalem, he does not just go out there and start laying stones. He goes to the people and he gets them together and he tries to motivate them to get this work done. And so he says they set their hands to this good work. He had the other people working with him to get this great project completed. We need to learn a lesson from that. Nehemiah 2, 16 through 18. And the lesson is this: you will not be an effective leader until this conviction that you can't get as much done by yourself as through others becomes your personal conviction. Until you cross that line in your mind where you truly believe yourself that we cannot get the work done the church needs to get done unless we do it as teams and units working together, you're not going to be an effective leader. So you really need to wrestle with that. If you're a team leader and you're trying to do everything yourself, if you're not delegating to other people, if you're not trying to organize other people, if you don't trust them to get things done, if you don't let them make mistakes so that they can learn and grow and be better team members, then you probably aren't going to be an effective leader. And you won't be because you actually don't believe in the value of teams and that other people as groups can get more done than just you yourself. So we have to wrestle with this in your own mind and evaluate your own leadership based on this underlying principle if you're going to be an effective team leader. Now we want to look at three attributes of an effective team leader. What does a person who is committed to getting things done through others, what kinds of attributes, what kinds of qualities, what kinds of things will this person constantly do to be effective? We're going to look at three of those. First of all, an effective team leader has an eye for what needs to be improved. This, I think, is the number one requirement. There are many important ones, but the tip of the sword, the very first one to be an effective team leader, is to have an eye for what needs to be improved, what needs to be changed. Let's go back and look at Nehemiah. We'll go back to some verses there in his book and see what he said. This is actually just before the verses that we just read. Let's look and see what he does when he gets to Jerusalem, before he has this meeting with this team of workers and they all decide they're going to do this project. Let's look at what he does when he gets there. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. And I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent well and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates which were burned with fire. So what is he doing? He is going out and he is inspecting the condition of this thing over which he is presiding, this project that he has to do, this area of his responsibility. He is first, before he does anything, before he gathers his team together and talks about anything, he goes and he looks to see what needs to be done, what needs to be fixed. Let's go on. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal under me to pass. In other words, he was riding a horse and it was very tight. So I went up in the night by the valley and viewed the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. So in two cases here, these verses, he's saying that he's viewing the wall. He's going to look and see what needs to be corrected, what needs to be improved. And he does this by himself with a few others, but he's the leader, so his first priority is to look and see what needs to be fixed. You see, if we're going to lead people, we have to know what's wrong, what needs to be changed, what are we leading them to do. That's very, very important. You have to have an eye for improvement. So let's ask again, and we'll circle back to this, which we already mentioned a little bit in the introduction. And that is, why do teams exist? Why does Christ have teams in the church? Why is there a nursery team and a sound team and the deacons? And why are these teams existing? What is their goal? Are they just there to be there? Or is there something greater that they're supposed to be about? Those teams exist to move Christ's work forward. Isn't that why the teams exist? Isn't that why the church exists overall? We individually exist to do that, and as teams we exist to move the work forward. Move it forward. Notice that word, forward. So doesn't that imply then that part of the reason teams exist is to improve in whatever area they find themselves? Whatever you're over, whatever you're responsible for, and in your team, you are to be moving that project forward, that team's work forward. You're not just to gather together and keep things the way that they are. You have to be looking for things that need to be improved. And as a team leader, you're one of the very, on the central front line of figuring out, like Nehemiah was, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be changed. And there are two types of things, two types of improvements that team leaders and teams should look to make. Two different types of improvements. The first type of improvement is the improvement of getting things working properly. That things are broken within our churches. So we need to, first of all, get them working. We have systems, processes, projects that are dysfunctional, that are not operating efficiently, that maybe are not even operating at all. They've just fallen into disrepair. And so one of the first things we need to do as team leaders is look to get things up and running properly before we can do anything else. One of the things that we're trying to do right now, and we're trying to do a number of things in the church, but one of the things that we're really trying to do is get our nursery team and our nursery processes and our whole nursery system up and working properly. It really hasn't been working properly. We've had problems with scheduling, we've had problems with being on time, we've had problems with reminding people, we've had problems with facilities. As you know, we're expanding the nursery now to try and enclose it so that we can have a safer, a larger area for the nursery, for the children. So this is a system that really needs to be working, and the nursery is extremely important for the growth of the church. If we want young people and young families to come, they have to come and see that we're professional, that we're organized, that we're on time, and that we've got our ducks all in a row. We've got good facilities. They feel safe and comfortable. If we don't do that, people won't come back. If we're late constantly, or if somebody forgets even to show up, all the little things that we don't really think are that important, well, a family will come and they will see one time and then they will leave. So what we're trying to do, we have a meeting this week on that. I hope everyone who is a part of the nursery has been supposed to have been contacted to come to that, and I hope that you will all come. It's a very important meeting for us to get things, continue to try and improve things in the nursery. But we got to get things up to the point where they're functioning properly, and then we can look at our second option for improving things. And that is to expand things that work. To expand things that work. Once we get them up and running and we've got them all solidified and working and functioning the way they should, then we can look to build on them, to grow them, to expand them. One of the ways that we're trying to do that now is think about Operation Easter Feast that we just had, which is under the umbrella of Operation Mercy. So we had Operation Wishbone in the fall, food ministry to the poor, and we just had one here at Easter. And the one at Easter just went so well. We learned a lot at Thanksgiving, and we were able to add all of those, all the new knowledge into our process for Easter, and it just blew up. It was incredibly successful. So we feel like we've got this thing operating well. Is it perfect? No, but it's pretty good. We've got this thing down pretty well at this point. So now that we've got it working the way we want it, now we can look to expand it. How do we make it bigger? How do we make it better? How do we get to more people? And this morning I challenged the church that we should consider 100 families at our next event, whether that's Thanksgiving or Christmas. We want to have a discussion as to which one of those would be the best. We need to grow this now and expand it. So a team leader is someone who is looking to take this next step and show the people what needs to be done, an eye for improvement. And it's important to know that when we do this, when we're pointing out, like when I was just pointing out some of the things that we've had go wrong in the nursery, I'm not doing that to criticize or condemn. I appreciate everyone who works in the nursery, everyone who has worked in it in the past, all the workers that are working on it now. It's not about condemning or being ugly or casting disparaging remarks on anyone. It's just simply an honest observation to say, hey, we need to improve this where we need to improve that. It's really about a culture of improving, where we don't get offended when someone says, I think we could do that better, or why don't we try this and it'll work better. This a cultural thing where we as a group of people are not allowing ourselves to be easily offended. And we're not, when we know when someone in the church says, hey, we could do this better if we did this, that we're not going to get upset, we're not going to get offended. We're going to say, hey, that's great, because we have a culture of improving, building a culture of improving. And a culture is nothing more than shared values that drive behavior. So if we have this shared value of improving, if that's the number one thing, then we won't get upset when someone says, hey, what if we tried it this way? All right, that's what we want to do. So don't be offended that I just said we need to make improvements in an area. There are a lot of areas that we need to make improvement, and there have been areas that need to be improved in things that I lead, like the Operation Wishbone back in the fall. There were a lot of things that needed to be improved, and so many people had so many great ideas. And that's why we're able to get it and make it better, because I was trying my very best to allow people to give input, and I wanted to make it better, even if it meant that my ideas were wrong. So we want to build that kind of a culture. Secondly, an effective team leader prioritizes the activity of the team. So the team leader is looking for ways to improve. Now, of course, the team leader, we'll talk about this in a future session, that team leader is going to use and rely on the wisdom of his or her team to figure out what needs to be improved and how to do it. Not saying that they don't use their team. But a leader is looking for ways to improve and looking for ways to expand. All right? And then that leader has to realize that you can't do everything. You have limited resources, limited time, and limited people. So you have to prioritize what you're going to try and do. Sometimes in the churches, especially those who have not been well managed and well run for a long time, it seems like there are 1,000 things that need to be fixed at the same time. What on earth do you do? How do you decide what you're going to do? Let's look at Proverbs 24:27. It gives us an interesting set of ideas here that help us to see this issue of prioritization and what we might want to be focusing on. Proverbs 24:27 says, "Prepare your outside work, make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward build your house." Prepare your outside work, make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward build your house. Now there is a lot of different lessons that you could take from this text. But let's just try and draw two as we think about this whole idea of priority. The first lesson is you can't do both at the same time. This person has outside work that needs to be done, in the field, and then this person is also building a house, trying to build a structure to live in. And what this proverb is saying is you got to do one before the other. You can't do both at the same time. So as a leader, one of the things you have to do is look at your list of things to do, things that need to be done, and try and determine which things to do in what order. And there are a couple of ways to look at that. There are a couple of ways to try and determine what to do. The first is you can do things that are easy to fix. You allow yourself to get what we call small wins. You look at your long laundry list and you say, okay, if we took these 2 or 3 things right here, we can get these fixed quickly. And we can make those improvements quickly. That will give your team some encouragement, that will show some progress, and it will sort of give you some momentum. You don't necessarily want to take on the biggest thing at first because it's going to take all of your time. So you may want to do that. You may want to have small wins and just pick the things that are easiest for you to knock off. All right? But another thing comes in the second part of this verse. What about the big problems? What about the big, oh my goodness, I don't know how we're going to fix this kind of problem. All right? Proverbs 24:27, prepare your outside work, make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward build your house. What is the second thing that we can draw from this? We can draw the principle that some things must be done first before other things can be accomplished. Some things must be done first. This proverb is saying, do this first and then do this. And perhaps in this case, the author is saying, look, get outside and make sure you've got your crops ready. Make sure you've got your food ready. Because if you go building your house and you don't have food, you're going to end up with a big mess on your hands. You're going to be working but have nothing to eat. So some things must be done first. And so I want to introduce and I want you to think about things like this. Large changes result from a series of small ones. Sometimes you have to start with a little thing, get this piece knocked out. Don't worry about the whole thing. Don't try and eat the whole elephant at once. But just take one bite out of this thing. First of all, let's do this. And as the leader, your job is to tell the people, look, if we do this one thing, and then we do another small thing, and then we do another small thing, and another small thing, eventually this big thing will take care of itself, and we will work it all out. Kind of like this illustration here. You've got to take that first small step. You want to get to the highest platform here, and that would be that fourth step there. That's the big goal that everybody sees and everybody recognizes. But sometimes as a leader, you have to say, look, how do we get to 4? Well, first we have to do this, and then we have to do this, and then we have to do this, and then finally we can get to that item. But the leader sort of has to be the one who makes that decision about what needs to be done and how to do it. It's kind of like at our church. Last year we spent a great deal of the year trying to get the budgeting process worked out a little bit better. Some improvements had been made, and so we tried to take those improvements and make them even better. So we developed a more more thorough budget. We developed some processes for getting money approved, for reimbursing people. We reduced the number of things that we were voting on so that we could move faster. We delegated power and authority to the finance team and to the individual other teams that might be using money so that they could spend their money without having to come back to the church all the time. And that budgeting process then has made it easier for us to do other things. For example, this nursery construction project that we're talking about. We have the budgeted money set aside. We have the team and the process for reimbursing folks who buy materials or whatever. We have a process for writing checks to go to Home Depot or Lowe's. You see, because we got this first thing done, now we can go and we can do something bigger that more people will see. You don't really see budgeting stuff, but you see construction. It's true, you might not know this, but we put in a fiber optic cable between the two buildings a couple of weeks ago. I put the connectors on it this week. And that fiber optic cable, we have our internet provider coming in the youth building, and we put that cable, that fiber cable in so we could have a very, very strong, solid connection between the two buildings. And that will later allow us to do other technology things because we'll have that network backbone in place to do that. Okay, so as a team leader, you have to break these things down into little pieces and try and do one before the other. And if you do enough small things, you will end up with all kinds of big things happening. So a leader has to prioritize. So what about your team? What needs to be improved in your team, and what needs to be expanded? And what can you do now to get a small win for your team? Or what big issues do you have that you might be able to break down into small pieces and just start on the smallest piece and start to build up? What can you do with your team in these areas? And then, an effective team leader, the third thing, knows the value of meetings. An effective team leader knows the value of meetings. I've noticed two sort of errors in the churches regarding meetings. The first error is people not liking meetings. There's in some cases there is sort of a little bit of a bias against meetings. It's like if you have a meeting at church, you're doing something that you do at work, and so you don't want to do what you do at work at church. So some people just don't like meetings. They don't come to meetings. They don't really want to have meetings. All right, that's one error. But here's the thing, folks. Just because you do it at work doesn't mean you can't do it at church. Some things that are done at work are actually wise, for all human endeavors, and meetings are one of them. And we want to take the best practices out there that we have, and we want to use them in the church if we can. But the second error that's made where teams are concerned is people not getting anything out of the meetings. Poorly run meetings. Meetings where you get there, but you really don't get anything done. There's no structure. We have no point to this meeting, and that could possibly inform the folks who say, yeah, I don't want to go to a church meeting because we don't ever get anything done. So let's talk about meetings for a moment. An effective team leader knows the value of meetings. Let's go back to Nehemiah chapter 2. Now, I just want you to notice this phrase here that's in yellow. Let's go back and read a little bit of the verses that we quoted earlier. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. This is after he had walked around and viewed the wall. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. Then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste, and so on. All right, then I said to them. How did he say something to them? He called them together in a meeting. He brought them together and told them the things God had put on his heart, the improvements that he saw. He gave them a vision, and he tried to help them become motivated to do this work. You see, he brought them together. Meetings happen in the Bible. There are church councils in the book of Acts. Jesus called his disciples together and talked to them in small groups. That's a meeting. Meetings can be very effective, and they're very important to the work of the kingdom. Let's talk about some benefits of meetings. When we get together, what can the benefits be? First of all, a meeting facilitates communication. I mentioned to you this morning how much God has been teaching me over the last year about the importance of communication, telling people what you're doing, keeping them up to speed. I also want to encourage that among our teams now, that we need, if you're in a team and you've made a decision, and that decision affects another part of the church or another team, you need to take the time to tell them in advance of what's happening so they won't be surprised. If there's something going on in the music ministry, the music team, then they need to communicate that to the sound team. If there's something going on in the building and grounds that's going to affect, let's say, the kitchen, then they need to tell the kitchen in advance. They don't need to wait till Sunday and they walk in and they can't use the certain power outlet or whatever because the building and grounds team didn't tell them. We have to take that initiative to communicate with people. But other than that, in meetings, we get to communicate to each other. We get to talk to each other. You know how important it is for us to get on the same page. We hear this from someone, we hear that from someone, we hear this from someone else, and we're never really sure what's going on, even within our own team. Well, when we get together, we can communicate and everybody gets on the same page and everybody understands. We can resolve problems. Maybe there's an issue between on some process issue that we just have to get ironed out, have to get figured out. One of the things we want to talk about in the nursery meeting is the process for scheduling someone if you can't be there. See, that's a very important thing. If I'm scheduled to do the nursery on Sunday and Friday I realize I have to go visit my sick mother in Georgia, then I need a process so that I can resolve that issue and get someone to come in so we don't miss doing the ministry. See, that can be handled in a meeting, and that's what we want to try and do. We also have vision casting. That's when the leader's saying, this is why this matters. Whenever you're leading a team, you always need to be telling your people, when you ask them to do something, why does this matter? Why is it important? One of the things that we're encouraging the nursery team to do, and we really encourage everyone who works in the church on Sunday morning, is to get there by 11:45. Be ready to go at 11:45. Well, you say, well, why do you need to do that? Well, the church doesn't start till 11. Well, the reason is because visitors start to come and drop off their kids before 11. And if we're not there when they get there, that's going to look like we're not organized, we're not professional, and we're not really serious about taking care of their children. You see, that's why it's important. It's not that Wes or Pat or someone else just wants to control your life. It's because it's a bigger issue that reflects and helps us to either keep people or to lose them. So vision casting, why is this important? Always tell people that when you tell them, ask them to do something. Meetings also generate wisdom and ideas. And I have learned this. I have absolutely learned this. If you get a group of God's people together and you start discussing some issue, some question, some process, you are going to get so many good ideas from those people that you never would have thought of yourself, even if you yourself have great ideas. Proverbs 11:14 says, in the multitude of counselors there is safety. The Spirit of God is working in other people, and He will give you ideas through them. And when you're in a group meeting, that's when you can have those come forward. And then finally, it allows coordination of effort. We can sit there and say, okay, I need someone to do this. All right, I'll do that. And then you'll do this. And then you're going to talk to each other when this happens. Last night, Brother Todd showed great leadership, and he got the deacons together yesterday at 4 o'clock to practice going through the Lord's Supper. Now, we didn't do it perfectly today, and mostly that was me, but we did it so much better this time because we coordinated our effort in that meeting. We could never have done that on the phone. We could never have done that one-on-one. We had to get together and walk through it and ask questions and get on the same page. Who does what, at what time, and in what way? Meetings are very, very good for that. So, how do you get the most out of meetings? Regular meetings then are critical to team success. You're not going to be able to run a good team, folks, if you're not meeting regularly with your people. I don't mean every day, not necessarily every week, but monthly or quarterly meetings at minimum to get your team together and discuss important things and make important decisions. So how do we make the most out of our meetings? Let's talk about this, and this all comes from some things that I've seen both in the professional world and in the church world regarding meetings. Let's end our session tonight talking about how to get the most out of a meeting as a team leader. First of all, you have to have everybody there. Now, when we talk about being a good team member, that's one of the things we're going to talk about. If your team leader calls a meeting, now look, we're all busy, we all have things, and sometimes we have to miss meetings. I'm not trying to be overbearing. I'm just saying that we really can't have an effective meeting if everybody's not there. So when you're leading a team, encourage your folks to get to the meeting, try and make it as convenient as possible, and schedule it out so that people have plenty of time. Now, people are going to have to miss, but we really need everyone there in order to have an effective meeting. Secondly, you have to have an agenda. The leader needs to know what is going to be talked about in that meeting beforehand. A leader has to be prepared. The leader has to spend some time thinking through what needs to be done, what issues there are, old issues, new issues. The leader has to drive this whole thing and has to have an agenda. Now, you can go and ask your participants, your members, well, what do we need to talk about? You guys got anything that you need to talk about? And you add that to your agenda. But you absolutely have to have an agenda. If you're coming together and then just going to figure it out when you're there, you've already lost. And that's why people don't like meetings, a lot of the reason, because we don't get anything done. So we have to have that agenda. When we have that agenda, we have to focus on that agenda. Yeah, we want to get together and say hi. We want to, love on each other and make sure everybody's doing all right. But remember, the point of the meeting is the same point that the team has. And what's the point of the team? To make improvement, to move Christ's work forward. So these meetings have to move Christ's work forward, or they are a waste of time. We will have plenty of time to talk to each other otherwise. Unless something big comes up, have the pleasantries, say, hey man, glad everybody's here, hope you're doing great. Now let's get down to business. Focus on that agenda. That is your marching orders for that meeting. Fourthly, assign tasks and develop action items. So the leader, when we're talking about something and we come to a decision, it doesn't matter what it is, we're going to develop a schedule for who's going to do greeting, be a church greeter each Sunday. Okay, we're going to develop, that's our action item. What I normally do in my notes is I'll put a little A with a circle, and that means action item. Well, once you have an action item, you have to have someone who's responsible to do it. Listen to this. Everybody's responsibility is nobody's responsibility. You can't have everybody responsible. You can't say we're going to develop a schedule. Okay, who's going to develop that schedule? And you say, and the leader can't do everything now. The leader needs to work. We're going to talk about the hard work of a leader later. But you have to say, okay, sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so, would you be able to develop this action? Would you be able to develop this thing for us? And once that person says yes, then they are on the hook to do it. They have given their word. And God says, let your yes be yes and your nay be nay. You have to do it once you say it. All right? So you have action items and you assign tasks to people and you write that down. You write, Billy Bob. We got an action item. Develop schedule. Billy Bob. All right? And then, and I didn't put this in here, you have to have a timeline. When do you think you can have that done, Billy Bob? You're not pressuring. You're not being a jerk. You're not trying to manipulate or control them. You're just asking them what is reasonable for you to have this done. How about 2 weeks? Is 2 weeks fair? Does that give you enough time? Yes. Okay. Put a date. So we've got an action item, we've got a task, who's assigned to do it, and we've got a timeline. See, now we can get things done. That's something that we follow up on, and that's the final point here. You have to take notes, and you have to hold people accountable. Now, how many meetings I've been in, both in professional and church, where nobody's writing anything down? So, we're all just going to remember everything. Is that it? Now let me ask you a question. You say, well, the leader ought to be writing it down. Okay, so the leader takes the notes. Well, let me ask you this. You agree to do something. The leader says, hey, will you make that schedule? And you say yes. Is your word not important enough to you to write down that you're supposed to do that and when you're supposed to do it? Why isn't every person in the room writing down notes, especially those that pertain to them? God says that our yes is to be yes and our no is to be no. Who will dwell with you, Lord? Who will dwell in your holy hill? He who swears to his own hurt and changes not. I really don't understand how Christians can be so flippant with their word when it comes to God's work. If you say you're going to be there at a certain time, that's your word. So you got to be there. If you say you're going to do something, it's your responsibility to remember. Now, of course, we want to develop processes where we remind people and keep people up to date and all that. But even if we didn't, if we left that room and didn't write down a single thing, but you said, I will make that agenda by April the 20th, do you think God is holding you accountable to that? Absolutely He is. And if you don't do it, do you think that's a sin? It is. Whether or not you were reminded or not, that is on you. You have to take responsibility for what you are supposed to do and what you agree to do in the kingdom of God. But we do want to have notes. We do want to hold others accountable. Now, I don't mean you hold them accountable in a rude or an aggressive or an abrasive sense. As a team leader, what I would do is, I would wait about a week. If there's 2 weeks to do something, I would wait a week and then I would just check in. I would say, hey, Billy Bob, just checking to see how you're coming with that agenda or that schedule. Is there anything you need from me? And I mean that sincerely, because if I'm the leader of the team, I'm there to help them get work done. We'll talk about that later as well. But how can I help you? Are there any roadblocks? Do you need any information? I'm here to help you. All right? But I am going to hold them accountable because I'm required to, because I'm the leader of that team. And all of this is done in love, all of this is done in patience, all of this is done in real gentleness. Now, we're not lording it over. But brothers and sisters, if we're going to get something done, we have to do it. We have to take responsibility for what we are supposed to do, and we have to get it done. There are just no excuses for not keeping your word and getting things done. And so meetings are a great way for us to get together and make all these decisions, develop these action items and these schedules and who's going to do what, when, and then have something that we can follow up with at the next meeting. And that's the job of the leader to do that. So, how do we get things done through others? First of all, we realize that we need others to succeed. That's the number one principle we've got to come to terms with, or we won't be a successful leader. Number two, we have to have an eye for improvement. We're always looking to improve things, but we're not looking to improve things in order to criticize or harm others. We are genuinely trying to move forward, and that means we have to say, hey, we could do better here, or we could do better there. Thirdly, we need to prioritize our activity. We need to determine what we can do. We talked about small wins, where you just choose whatever's the easiest to get done. And we talked about doing things in order, small things first that build up to a larger project being accomplished. And then finally, we have to make good use of meetings. We have to have them regularly, and we have to execute them well so that we get things done and we don't waste people's time.